On today's episode, I'll break down what went wrong with the Blackhawks offense this past season, and I'll also dish out my first report card grade to none other than Mr. Connor Bedard.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome on into another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can go and find me on X at Jack Bushman2, and make sure to also go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey, so that way you can get all of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And also, quick reminder to everyone watching this right here, right now on YouTube, please make sure you like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Really does help me out in growing the show. If you're tuning into this on a podcast app, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever it may be, please make sure you're downloading all of those latest episodes. You can rate and review the show as well if you like what you're listening to on a daily basis. And last but certainly not least, got to let you all know that today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Put on your game face and download Monopoly Go right now for free on the App Store or Google Play. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. To kick things off here today, as I mentioned late last week when I went through my mini Chicago Blackhawks season recap, I also want to take a look at each and every part of the Chicago Blackhawks roster and talk about why things went the way that they did this year and kind of what's the outlook at that specific position moving forward. And starting things off here today, I wanted to begin with the forward group. And, the Blackhawks offense had a rather putrid season, 32nd out of 32 teams in terms of goals per game. It was actually the lowest scoring season the Blackhawks have had since the NHL moved to an 80-plus game schedule. They were also 28th on the man advantage and near the bottom of the power play for a majority of the year. And yeah, it was just a really frustrating season to watch this Blackhawks team offensively. Somehow they managed to be worse than they were the year prior. And I want to talk a little bit today about how that happened because, based on all the moves the Blackhawks made to help this forward group last summer, they add Nick Foligno and Taylor Hall via a trade with the Boston Bruins. They go out and sign Ryan Donato. They trade for Corey Perry from the Tampa Bay Lightning. They also, of course, draft Connor Bedard first overall. They re-sign Andreas Athanasiou. It's another year under the belt for Philip Kurashev and Taylor Radish. Tyler Johnson was coming back fully healthy. Lucas Reichel and Cole Gutman were two guys who looked like they were ready to sort of burst onto the scene at the NHL level. And then on the defensive side of things, Kevin Korchinski, the former 7th overall pick in 2022, is arriving to the NHL level. He, of course, is an offensive-minded defenseman. And then Seth Jones was coming off of his best offensive year as a member of the Blackhawks, tallying 12 goals. So all of that really, to me, said that the Blackhawks, I didn't envision them taking a huge leap and being playoff contenders, but I certainly expected them to be better than they were in 2022, 2023, and that just didn't happen. I also expected, because of all of this talent, the Blackhawks were going to have a top 15 power play in the NHL this year, and of course, that never happened either. And how did that happen? Well, really right from the get-go, it's like all of these guys were just getting picked off one by one, or they just weren't living up to the expectations that we kind of had entering the season. Taylor Hall, who gets brought in, probably the most notable offseason addition that the Blackhawks and general manager Kyle Davidson made to go and play on that top line with Connor Bedard. I think that's what he was brought here to do, and that was the role he was going to be playing for most of the season, but he unfortunately tears his ACL early on. Andreas Athanasiou also goes down just 11 games into the year. Then, Corey Perry, who got off to a really good start to his Blackhawks tenure to kind of win the fan base over after he was one of the Hawks fans' most hated players for years and years and years. We finally start to like this guy. Then he goes and does what he does and gets kicked off of the team. Taylor Radish got off to a really slow start, and then he got injured. Tyler Johnson got injured in December. Seth Jones got off to a really cold start. Same with Lucas Reichel, right? He kind of looked like a shell of himself based on what we had seen towards the end of the 2023 campaign. Cole Gutman was sent back down to Rockford early. So it just kind of went downhill rather fast for the Blackhawks. No one other than kind of, Connor Bedard or Philip Kurashev or Nick Foligno out of the forward group, you could say, was really living up to the expectations. And they never were really able to gather it all together and get everyone healthy and get everyone clicking at the same point in time until, they had their best month of the season in March, but weren't even able to keep that momentum going and had a pretty terrible month of April to finish things out. So that's why this forward group really struggled. And kind of looking at some of the numbers as a whole, right? The Blackhawks only had 220 goal scorers this year. One of them was 18-year-old Connor Bedard. The other was Jason Dickinson. And look, I love Jason Dickinson. But when he's, tied for your leading goal scorer, it's probably not a good sign that your offensive season did all that well. And then only 4 other guys from the forward group reached double digits. Philip Kurashev and Nick Foligno Philip Kurashev, had 18. Nick Foligno had 17, as did Tyler Johnson. Then Ryan Donato chipped in for 12 goals as well. And then looking at some of the other guys who we had high expectations for, Lucas Reichel being the first one. I mean, he only had 5 goals in 65 games, Joey Anderson. I love how he made a role for himself, but not really an offensive piece. He only had 5 goals in 55 games. Seth Jones, you look at the numbers, he had 8 goals this year, but I think 7 of those came in the final 15 or 16 games. Kevin Korchinski had a couple of goals late to pad his stats a little bit more, and he even only finished with 5. So just not a lot of depth scoring for the Blackhawks other than, the big guns up top, Connor Bedard, Nick Foligno, Philip Kurashev, Jason Dickinson. Those guys were really the head honchos offensively, and then Tyler Johnson and a couple of defensemen came on late. So to me, what was really clear in terms of the outlook for this Blackhawks forward group, what they have coming back, by the way, those guys in the forward position who are coming back next year are currently under contract: Connor Bedard, Philip Kurashev, Andreas Athanasiou, Jason Dickinson, Ryan Donato, Nick Foligno, Lucas Reichel, Frank Nazar, and Landon Slaggert are for sure coming back, although Slaggert and Nazar could be candidates to open things up in Rockford. It's all going to be based on how their training camp goes. And then Cole Gutman is really the only guy down in Rockford that I could foresee really challenging for an opening night roster spot. So based on what the Blackhawks have coming back next year, what we learned this season, and what I think they need, it's pretty clear they need some more help for Connor Bedard. Taylor Hall is also someone who's going to be coming back. I think, getting him healthy is going to be really big, but it's hard to envision him getting off to a hot start coming off of a torn ACL and just having to find his footing a little bit, if you will, in game action. So I certainly think the Blackhawks are going to have to add another legitimate top 6 piece. Because look, even, some of the other guys who performed well this year, Nick Foligno, Ryan Donato, Jason Dickinson. Yeah, they're good players and they performed well for the Blackhawks this past season, but they're all bottom 6 guys on really good NHL teams. Even Andreas Athanasiou, I would say, is probably that as well. So I think for the Blackhawks forward group, look, I'll get into offseason discussions about which free agents I think are realistic options. Doesn't sound like they're going to be pursuing like a Steven Stamkos or a big gun. Hey, I would be for it, but it doesn't sound like that's what Kyle Davidson wants to do. But at the very least, I think you got to get another legitimate top 6 scoring piece, and then probably round out the offensive group with another good third line option as well. I think that's really what the Blackhawks need. And then also hopefully just some better luck. They've really been berated with injuries these last couple of years, but they definitely need top 6 help along with Connor Bedard. They need to give him a little bit more for him, I think, to help him take take that next step in his sophomore NHL campaign. So there's my forward outlook for the Chicago Blackhawks based on what we saw last year, what they have coming back this season. Coming up here in just a moment, I'll be giving out my first report card grade for the 2024 season with none other than Mr. Connor Bedard. But first, I got to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. It's playoff time in both the NBA and the NHL, and baseball's in full swing as well. And FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. And right now, new customers can get $150 worth of bonus bets guaranteed. Yes, you heard me right. $150 worth of bonus bets, win or lose. And you can use those bonus bets to bet on everything from slap shots throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs to slam dunks on the way to an NBA championship and home runs all across all the major league ballparks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Go and visit fanduel.com/lockdown right now and make your first bet an automatic win. All you have to do is go and visit fanduel.com/lockdown and sign up if you're a new customer to get $150 worth of bonus bets guaranteed. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I also got to talk to you all about Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to the next ball game that you want to attend, and I'm happy to announce that Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets both faster and easier. Plus, prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. And with last-minute ticket deals, all-in prices, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time helps take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. And I personally have used Game Time for probably close to a decade now, back when I was in high school going and seeing the Blackhawks at the UC in their heyday, or going to watch those great Chicago Cubs teams on their way to their first World Series in over 100 years. And even when I'm going to games today and when I'm traveling in another city, want to go and see a concert or a theater event with one of my good buddies, I always check out Game Time because it's the fastest, easiest, and cheapest way for you to purchase all of your tickets. I highly recommend you all go and download the Game Time app right now. And when you do, make sure to create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off with your first purchase. Yes, you heard me right. You can get $20 off to go see Seiya Suzuki play at Wrigley Field this season. All you have to do, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Game Time. The Locked On NFL mock draft is available right here, right now. Yes, it is already passed, but you can go back and find the ultimate 6-episode series on the Locked On NFL draft to hear who the local Locked On experts picked for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle for this upcoming season. The Locked On NFL mock draft is available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube and also wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Segment 2, Connor Bedard, the 2023 #1 overall selection, as anticipated when he stepped onto the stage at last year's NHL draft after hearing his name called, and also as anticipated all throughout his first NHL season, was officially named as a finalist for the 2024 Calder Trophy on Tuesday morning for NHL Rookie of the Year, along with Minnesota Wild defenseman Brock Faber and New Jersey Devils defenseman Luke Hughes. Kind of had a feeling as I've been breaking things down in terms of the Calder Trophy race over the last couple of months that these were probably the 3 guys that were going to be the finalists. Marco Rossi, also of the Minnesota Wild, was the only other guy that was kind of in contention here, but I think it was pretty clear cut and dry that these were the 3 rookies that were going to be duking it out, if you will, for the Calder Trophy, although we all know it's going to go Connor Bedard's way when this puppy winds up getting announced. The odds makers sure think it's going that way, and I don't see any legitimate argument for Brock Faber over Connor Bedard unless you're a Minnesota Wild fan and you're hung up on Connor Bedard's minus 44 plus minus this season, even though we know that's what happens when you play a lot for one of the worst teams in the NHL. That's really all the Minnesota Wild fans have to hang their hats on. And I'm not denying that Brock Faber had an excellent season. He was huge for them, but he wasn't more impactful than Connor Bedard. No way, shape, or form about it. The numbers certainly suggest it's going to Connor Bedard as well. Led all rookies with 22 goals this year, tied for the most assists with 39 with Brock Faber, interestingly enough, but did beat him out in points pretty handedly. Connor Bedard had 61 to lead all rookies, and oh yeah, he only did that in 60 games worth of action, whereas Brock Faber and Luke Hughes, by the way, both played in all 82 games for their team, and Connor Bedard played a very meaningful role for the Chicago Blackhawks. I know both Hughes and Brock Faber were over 20 minutes per game and playing top pairing minutes essentially for each of their respected clubs. But Connor Bedard was pretty close to 20 minutes himself, averaged 19 minutes and 47 seconds, which even compared to other rookie defensemen, still third in the entire NHL among first-year players. So Connor Bedard had a very, very impactful season. In less games of action, he was more productive. He's the younger player of this bunch. Not that that has any meaning to it, but I think makes it a little bit more impressive. And oh yeah, he's been treated and marketed as this next big superstar. Connor Bedard is going to walk away with the Calder Trophy. Make no mistake about it, Blackhawks fans. But really interested to see who's going to come in second and third in the voting. I think it is going to be Brock Faber at number 2, but I wonder how close it's going to be. In terms of the offense, they both had very similar seasons. Same amount of points in 82 games played. Luke Hughes had one more goal, but Brock Faber had one more assist. The real difference, though, is Brock Faber was the much better defensive defenseman in his rookie year, whereas Luke Hughes is known as an offensive-minded guy with his skating ability. But Brock Faber was already a true shutdown D-man in his rookie year for the Minnesota Wild. So I'm assuming he's probably going to get the edge over Luke Hughes to finish in that number 2 spot, but don't really think it's a race between he and Bedard in terms of who's going to walk away with the trophy. And since we are already talking about Connor Bedard, I figured there would be no other player better to kick things off for my 2024 end of the season report cards, where I dish out a grade to each and every Blackhawks player for their performance in the regular season. It's something that I've been doing in the summertime for, the last 2 or 3 years now. By the way, check out the wicked Bedsy t-shirt that my buddy Eli got me. Shout out to Eli for all the good merch, along with the Gucci Mane shirt that he got me for my birthday, one of my favorites as well. Thought I'd bust this bad boy out since we're talking about Bedsy here today. But yeah, got to kick things off here with Connor Bedard, the most impactful player for the Chicago Blackhawks this season and the most impactful rookie. But I always really enjoy going through all of these end of the season report cards to kind of talk about how each player fared throughout the course of the regular season. And Connor Bedard, fittingly, here is going number 1. I already talked about some of his numbers just a moment ago. In 68 games played, led the Blackhawks with 22 goals, tied with Jason Dickinson, also led them in assists with 39 and 61 points. Yeah, he finished as a minus 44 on the season, and he certainly needs work on the defensive side of things. I'm not ignoring that. But if you're still using plus minus as like a focal point of an argument in the year 2024, that kind of tells me all I need to know about who's having the argument or who's giving that sort of perspective. Yeah, it's not a good look for Connor Bedard, but I'm not going to absolutely hold it against him. Like I said, he played 20 minutes on one of the worst teams in the NHL. That's what's going to happen. Look at Seth Jones's numbers for the last few years. Do I think Seth Jones is a perfect defenseman? Absolutely not. But those numbers are inflated because of his role on the Blackhawks. Some of the other numbers here for Bedard: out of his 22 goals, 18 came on the even strength variety, which I thought was very encouraging. 4 power play goals. You can kind of look at that glass half full or glass half empty. Yeah, there's absolutely more work for him to be done on the power play. But also, still finding ways to chip in when he was kind of the focal point of the Blackhawks man advantage. I really think his power play passing and recognition of the defensive coverages out there, I certainly think that improved as the year went on. Bedard had 206 shots in his 68 games worth of action. That's what I love about him, man. We've seen so many prospects come up for the Blackhawks in the NHL, and be timid when they have the puck on their stick or try to make that extra pass or try to get a little bit too fancy. Not Connor Bedard whatsoever. The kid is not scared of shooting the puck from anywhere. He believes also that he can score from anywhere on the ice, and I'm absolutely here for it. The fans up in the 300s are going to be loving Connor Bedard for years and years and years. And what I also think is encouraging is that he only shot 10.7% this season. Anything in double digits is good, but for a kid who I anticipated to have one of the best shots immediately when he stepped onto the NHL scene, I think there's certainly room to grow there for Connor Bedard. Like, I really believe he could be a 15 to 16% shooter for his entire career. I don't think that's unreasonable with the type of special release that he has. So I like to see that. There's still area for growth, and he was already, the leading goal scorer for the Blackhawks at 18, averaged 19 minutes and 47 seconds of time on ice. That number only got higher, by the way, as the year went on, showing Luke Richardson was plenty comfortable giving Connor Bedard the lion's share of the offensive zone starts, a lion's share of the ice time, and also just trusting him more and more and more. Where Bedard probably struggled the most this year was at the faceoff top, won a brutal 38.9% of his percent of his draws at the dot. And while we have seen, noted former number one overall picks like Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid, we've seen a lot of guys struggle at the faceoff dot in their first NHL campaign. But this is a pretty brutal number. I don't know any of them had a number as low here as Connor Bedard. So that's really something that he's going to have to work on this summer. But the way that the kid's work ethic works, he's going to be in the gym, on the ice, really doing everything in his power to make sure he doesn't put up a number as poor as that again in the future. In terms of the takeaways to giveaways, 47 takeaways, 57 giveaways. I thought that was pretty impressive considering one of Bedard's Achilles heels this year was just him trying to do too much, albeit, he kind of had to with who he was playing with and who the Blackhawks were icing out there. But to see he only had 10 more giveaways than he did takeaways, I thought was notable and showed also that I think he was pretty solid on the back check for a first-year player. Maybe not the most responsible defensively as a center, but works hard on the forecheck to force and create turnovers. So I was impressed with him there, and also like to see 54 hits out of Connor Bedard in 68 games. Look, he's never going to be a physical guy. He's never going to throw boomers out there and score goals the way Alex Ovechkin did when he came into the NHL. But I also like to see him, not shying away from that side of the game, not putting up like 8 like we'd see out of Patrick Kane. Not that made any difference in how his career went, but it's just a nice little wrinkle in there that I like to see out of Connor Bedard. And then the analytics, 51.3 Corsi for percentage. I haven't looked at everyone's numbers yet, but I have to imagine that's one of the better ones for the Blackhawks. Was on the ice for 78 goals for to 91 against at even strength, had an 86.7 on ice save percentage from his goaltenders. I think, he probably has a reason to do with that number being well below 900, but also can show that the Blackhawks goaltending, especially when it wasn't Mrazek, wasn't always stellar out there. So the good and the bad, breaking it down here for Connor Bedard. What was good? There was a lot of it. The goal scoring was excellent, I thought, from day one. That was his best attribute coming into the league, but the playmaking, I thought, really developed as the year went on. I thought, like I said, it was pretty clear that he started to think and see the game at a high level and really understand what opposing defenses and penalty kills were kind of throwing out there at him. And then as the year progressed as well, I thought he scored more than just the pretty goal scorer's goals. Like, he went to the front of the net. He tried different things. He scored from some weird angles. He scored the Michigan against the St. Louis Blues, which was probably my favorite goal all season long. And then on the power play too, the Blackhawks power play in the last month and a half to 2 months was much better than it was all year long. And a lot of that was, like I said, Connor Bedard recognizing and understanding what was going on out there, recognizing that he's going to get a lot of the attention. And if/when that happens, that means someone else is going to be open. I thought he did a good job of setting up his teammates as the year went on the man advantage. He also improved his transition game. The back checking, I thought, got better. So all in all, yeah, he knocked it out of the park, man. He's insanely talented. That's very obvious. Was the team's best player all season long at 18 years old, was their leading goal scorer, their leading assist guy, their leading point getter. And he seems like he's also a better person, the right type of kid that you want to have in the limelight in this position, being considered a generational talent, man. The kid handled it all so well this year. I'm sure it was a ton for him and probably drained him. I'm sure he was mentally and physically exhausted, but like he didn't bat an eye. He handled the media coverage, the media pressure really, really well. Yeah, maybe he didn't eclipse that point per game margin that I thought he was going to as a rookie, but he also missed some time. He dealt with some adversity, and this Blackhawks offense was absolutely horrible. Like I said, the worst that they've had since the NHL moved to an 80 plus game schedule. So he handled himself beautifully. He lived up to the expectations. He was the Blackhawks' best player. He was the NHL's best rookie. And he's just a really good kid. And like I said, with his work ethic, he's just going to be in the gym and on the ice this summer trying to get better and better and better. And I'm already excited to see him back on the ice in a couple of weeks' time at the World Championship. In terms of the bad for Connor Bedard, he definitely needs work on the defensive side of things at the faceoff dot as well. And I also thought it was pretty clear the production dipped at the end of the year. I assumed that was attributed to just going through the grind of a professional season for the first time in his career. It looked like it caught up to him a little bit there at the end of the year, but no harm, no foul. The only other thing that really came to mind that he needs to work on is putting himself in better positions, I think, a little bit out there. He left himself susceptible to some big hits, and obviously the one against the New Jersey Devils is what stands out when he fractured his jaw, but that wasn't a dirty hit. That's because Connor Bedard had his head down and put himself in a pretty bad position out there. So those are some things I need to work on, but all in all, in terms of my final grade that I'm going to give him, I don't know how you couldn't give Connor Bedard an A. I don't know if I'd give him an A+, but I'm going to give him an A. All you fans who are watching and listening to this right now, go and jump in the comment section and let me know what grade you would give Connor Bedard for his performance during his rookie season and whether or not you think it's going to be close for the Calder Trophy race between him, Brock Faber, and Luke Hughes. All right. There is my first report card grade from the 2024 season on Mr. Connor Bedard. Coming up in just a moment here, I still have to talk about the Rockford IceHogs' brutal overtime loss to the Grand Rapids Griffins of Game 1 over the weekend. But first, I need to talk to you all real quick about Monopoly Go. We've all been there, either as a player or as a fan. It's halftime, and the scoreboard is not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure if you or your team can pull out a victory, but that's when you dig deep, you lift your head up and say to yourself, it's time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friend's money as I possibly can. That's right. The smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime and with tons of new twists, including countless dynamic Monopoly boards, making your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball, and charging other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and win tournaments together to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or on Google Play. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Again, if you haven't done so already, please make sure to smash that like button, comment down below, and subscribe to the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel. And also, make sure to go and check out the new Locked On Sports Today, because Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts from Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. So make sure to go and check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Segment 3, before I wrap things up here for the day, I did want to be sure to mention quickly that the Rockford IceHogs, unfortunately dropped Game 1 of the best-of-5 first-round series with the Grand Rapids Griffins over the weekend, falling 3-2 in overtime. After racing out to a 2-0 lead through the opening 40 minutes, they surrender 2 goals in the third, including the game tire with under 5 minutes to play, and then wind up falling 3-2 in overtime. A little bit controversially, as well, as there was a a couple of calls that were missed by the officials prior to the Griffins and Jonathan Berggren, their leading point getter in the regular season, netting the overtime winner. But we can't really blame it on that. The IceHogs had the game in the palm of their hands in their own building with the fans going ahead 2-0 in the third period. You just can't blow those type of leads in the most meaningful time of the season in the Calder Cup playoffs. And like I said, that came at the BMO. And as I talked about with Rockford IceHogs broadcaster Mike Folta, make sure to go and check out that episode if you haven't done so already. We got game 2 going on between the IceHogs and the Griffins here tonight. So if you want more of a preview on that matchup and what happened in the 12 regular season meetings between Grand Rapids and Rockford, make sure to go and check out that show. You can easily do so by just clicking on the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel down below. But as we talked about, game 1 was a massive opportunity for the IceHogs with how the Calder Cup playoffs are structured in terms of who is hosting which games. It's not like the Stanley Cup playoffs. The IceHogs were the 3 seed while the Griffins were the 2 seed, but the IceHogs got to host game 1 before Grand Rapids will now host games 2 and 3. So it was a real chance for the IceHogs to get some momentum early on in the season, in the series, and then, go and hopefully split in Grand Rapids. That lets you come back to Rockford for game 4 with a chance to close this series out. But now, by dropping game 1, that kind of puts the IceHogs back against the wall here, because if they don't win one of these 2 games in Grand Rapids, their season is over. So a real big meeting here tonight between these 2 teams. Hate to say it, but probably a must-win for the Rockford IceHogs. But as far as some other tidbits that I wanted to share from what went down in game 1, a booming start for Rockford. They jumped ahead 1-0 in the first period. Michael Tepley with the first goal of the Calder Cup playoffs for them, set up by none other than Lucas Reichel with a sweet primary assist. And then Zach Sanford on a nice play in transition put the IceHogs ahead 2-0 in the second period, had them up by a pair going into the third. But yeah, then things just kind of crumbled down the stretch late. Simone Edvidson had a nice assist on Grand Rapids' opening goal, and then they wound up tying it with just under 5 minutes left in regulation. As far as who Lucas Reichel played with, Michael Tepley obviously was his line mate based on him setting him up for the opening goal of the game. He also was on the right wing between Luke Philp was playing that center position. And then no Nolan Allen, no Cole Gutman, unfortunately, for the IceHogs as well in game 1. Both of them have been dealing with injuries and missed the end of the regular season because of them. I don't have any word as of whether they're going to be playing for game 2 here this evening, but fingers crossed on that end. And if Allen does get in the lineup, what a decor this is for the IceHogs. Crevier and Phillips, Ethan Del Mastro and Philip Ruse, and then you can also have Nolan Allen back there with Wyatt Kaiser. That makes for a real stud decor. And then Cole Gutman was one of their best offensive players at the end of the season there, won Player of the Month, the first IceHog to do that in nearly a decade. Unfortunately, banged up a little bit towards the final couple of weeks. Man, the IceHogs could really use him back for game 2 and at the very least game 3 before hopefully this thing shifts on over to Rockford. Last little tidbit here, Jackson Stauber, no surprise, got the start in net for game 1. I know Mike Folta said that he wouldn't be surprised to see Stauber and Comesso kind of rotated throughout the course of the series, but now that the IceHogs lost game 1 on home ice and really need this one here tonight in Grand Rapids, I'm hard-pressed to believe that Anders Sorensen is going to go with someone else other than Jackson Stauber. So I imagine Staubs is going to be back in there for game 2. We'll see if there's any other lineup changes for the IceHogs. And also, no Paul Ludwinski, Gavin Hayes, Nick Lardis, Samuel Savoie, Alex Ferrand, all of those guys who have been reassigned to the IceHogs late in the year or have signed on with an ATO. Didn't play in game 1, and maybe Ludwinski gets in there. I don't envision anyone else playing here for game 2. So there are the latest updates out of the Calder Cup playoffs following a tough game 1 defeat for the Rockford IceHogs. And that's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for tuning into the show. Be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcast, and to go and subscribe to the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel if you don't already subscribe. subscribe for this awesome shirt right here. It's one of the favorite things I have in my closet. Also, make sure to go and check me out on X at Jack Bushman 2. You can also follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey as well. So that way you can get all of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. So until the next episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your days. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.